is an organization which focuses on the research and conservation of lions across various landscapes throughout Africa. Tune in to hear more about their work. Welcome, Alayne. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you, Anish. It's a pleasure to be here.
So, what was the idea behind Lion Landscapes and what is the organization's long term vision?
So Lion Landscapes has really evolved over time, and it will no doubt sort of continue to evolve as we move forward. But our focus has always been coexistence between people and large carnivores. We work in really vast landscapes that include a mix of different land use types and levels of protection, but most of our efforts are always focused on areas where large carnivores are living among people and livestock. And properly functioning protected areas are really vital to large carnivore conservation. But the areas surrounding and interconnecting them are also really vital for the long-term survival of these carnivore species. So it's in these areas really that effective coexistence between people and large carnivores is really critical. So our vision is as an organization, which is something we worked on relatively recently, is a world where people and large carnivores can thrive together in a healthy landscape. And the lion is a figurehead species for this because it's the hardest of the large carnivores for people to coexist with, and so it's often actually the first to be exterminated from an area because of that. So people can thrive with healthy populations of lions, and they can thrive with any large carnivores and pretty much any wildlife, really. So lions are also a great umbrella species for healthy ecosystems. Because basically, in order to have thriving populations of lions, you need healthy populations of prey, and you need habitat, and you also need to have mitigated conflict with people.
What are some of the most prominent threats to Africa's lions?
Yeah, the biggest threats to lions are sort of common ones. They're really loss of habitat, loss of prey, conflict with people over loss of livestock to predation. But when you go a level deeper, the sort of main threat underpinning all of this is the same as it is for all wildlife species, really. And nature simply does not have enough value to compete with other land uses. This can be financial value, cultural value, or simply existence value. So the choices that people are making often reflect this. For example, we dig up acres of sort of natural habitat to build houses because we value more spacious houses with larger gardens more than we do having that natural habitat. We'll concrete over an area because we want more parking, or we don't want to get muddy shoes. But these kind of trade-offs run through all of our life decisions. So when it comes to conservation of species that can threaten human lives or livelihoods like lions, they often have a significantly negative value for those people, and that have to share the landscape with them. So living with a pride of lions in a neighborhood, for example, could mean the loss of valuable livestock, even human life, although that's relatively rare. So it's not really surprising that people choose not to live with lions when living with them means that they have to bear significant costs. So the challenge really is, how do we translate the global value of a species like the African lion into value linked to their presence for people who are actually living with them?
Or what is the relationship between human-lion conflict and vultures?
So it's quite a simple one, really, although it's a bit unexpected. But vultures and lions share one key proximate threat, and that's the misuse of poisons. So lions kill livestock. People want to get rid of lions, and one of the easiest ways of doing this is by using sort of easily available agrochemicals as poisons. So vultures feed on the poison carcasses that are actually meant for lions, or actually the dead poison carnivores themselves. And then the vultures also die, along with any other scavenging species who's also fed on the carcasses. So really the misuse of poison is devastating because it's so indiscriminate, but it's also because it can poison the environment for people and livestock too.
So, how prevalent is human-lion conflict in the work in, and what are some potential solutions to mitigate this conflict?
LL mostly works in unprotected areas shared with people and livestock.
Yeah.
And so conflict between people and large carnivores over the predation of livestock is really commonplace in all of our areas. Livestock represents wealth, and often a family's entire wealth. And so it's not surprising that when lions and other large carnivores kill that livestock, people want to kill carnivores in retaliation. I think what is surprising is actually the levels of tolerance we see in the areas we work. If you think of kind of farmers and foxes in the UK, and then imagine much poorer people living with much bigger and more voracious predators, it is amazing that they tolerate so much. But tolerance can only really go so far, and an animal like lion can cause really devastating losses. And we're talking about losses that can really impact people's ability to provide basic needs like food and schooling or healthcare for their families. We have many programs that tackle this problem, and they sort of fall under three main pillars of work, because we really couldn't go into all the details of these programs here because it would take us another couple of hours to do that. But really they fall into three main pillars, and the first one is like stop the loss. And this pillar for us is sort of the anti-poisoning work we do, sort of anti-poaching, anything like that directly stops the killing of large carnivores. Our second pillar is reduce the cost associated with living with large carnivores. And examples of this might be the work we do developing predator-proof livestock husbandry to stop livestock being killed, and our third pillar is unlock the benefits associated with carnivore presence for the people that are living with them. So examples of this might be community camera trapping and lion-friendly livestock and other programs that we do that actually sort of give community direct benefits through having wildlife in their area. So sort of the plan is that by stopping the loss and reducing the cost and unlocking the benefits associated with large carnivore presence, we can really tilt that balance of cost-benefit balance and achieve our mission, which is really trying to make large carnivore conservation valuable to local people and actually global communities as well.
One particular project I found quite interesting is the Conservation Co-op program. Could you elaborate a bit on this?
Yeah, sure. So the Coexistence Co-op represents all the work we do in partnership with the Peregrine Fund, who obviously vulture conservation is a big part of the work that they do. And so this work all focuses on reducing the misuse of poisons in the landscape. And also it focuses on building awareness around the risks to people and livestock by, through creating a contaminated landscape using poisons. Because people obviously are not going to change their ways if you tell them wildlife's going to die, because that's what they're trying to do, is kill large carnivores. But they will listen more if you're telling them that actually this can have dangers for them and their livestock as well. And the other thing that we do is build local capacity to mitigate poisoning in the area, so people can respond really quickly and minimize the damage from poisoning. And also working with pastoralist people to sort of deal with the main cause of poisoning, which is obviously livestock loss, and helping them to protect their livestock more effectively.
Another really interesting project is the Lion Carbon project. So could you elaborate about the idea behind this and what impact has it had so far?
Yeah, of course. As you said, this kind of links back to the value aspect. Lion Carbon really falls under our unlock the benefits pillar of work. And the red carbon market is really important from a conservation perspective because it values the prevented emissions through conservation and regeneration of existing forests. So when red projects are managed well, this can really result in creation of meaningful income for local communities based on the conservation of standing forests. But protecting habitat, while protecting habitat is really a crucial step in protecting wildlife, loss of habitat is a key threat for many species, including the African lion, as we've mentioned already. But the conservation of forests doesn't necessarily equate to the conservation of wildlife species. And the red market, so while it's a really important step in the right direction, it doesn't value forests that support rich biodiversity significantly more than empty forests. So there's still little or no incentive for people to live with really costly species such as the African lion. So Lion Carbon is a partnership between Biocarbon Partners and Lion Landscapes, really to develop a premium carbon credit, where a percentage of the income is linked to verified presence of large carnivores and their prey, and also wildlife conservation actions on the ground. Not just the conservation of forests, but also wildlife conservation within those forests. And Yeah, so that's the sort of main principle behind it. And lion carbon areas, we also carry out sort of structured surveys on top of the required carbon monitoring to track trends in wildlife abundance and distribution over time. And additionally, we really work to build capacity to protect wildlife and its main threats locally, as well as protecting livelihoods from wildlife damage in these areas. So again, together, these activities are really working to incentivize and enable people to conserve forests and wildlife, including the largest carnivores, not just empty forests. So lion carbon is still slightly theoretical at this stage because our carbon providers and biocarbon partners were actually really successful and sold out of carbon shortly after we co-developed the concept. So we didn't actually have much lion carbon to sell. We are, as BCP, as biocarbon partners grow their project areas and more carbon credits become available to sell, we're going to really be working to grow this idea. So we don't have, the impacts of this yet, but I do think that this is going to be something that's really worth pursuing.
Lion Landscapes does a lot of research. So could you elaborate a bit about some of your ongoing research projects?
Yes, yeah, definitely. We have lots of kind of wonderful PhD students and MSc students who work with us to answer these important research questions. And all of their research work is really interesting. So it's really hard to talk about one without the others. But probably the area I had the most personal interest in has been exploring the limits to coexistence. So basically trying to look at what human, environmental or ecological factors are most important in determining, whether lions or other large carnivores will be able to coexist with people in an area into the future. So because these are potentially things that we could actually manage for and use, in our conservation programs as well. And I mean, this is something that Lion Landscapes does and is one of our strengths, I feel, is that we have this sort of real underpinning of science and research behind a lot of our conservation programs. Research and monitoring really helps us develop effective conservation projects in the first place, but also continues to kind of inform their development moving forward as well. So I think I guess a simple example of this would be lion movement data from satellite collars. Obviously, this is used in a lot of different research. But one of the things it revealed was how much lions were relying on, on really dense, sort of difficult to see through habitats when they were in and around people. And this was really allowing them to use the landscape and not have to sort of expend lots of energy moving long distances every time people woke up and started using the landscape. So this was something that's very sort of simple, but you just don't see unless you've got research going on and you've got, satellite collars on and you can really collect that data.
Lion Landscapes has been quite supportive of trophy hunting for lion conservation. So why are you very supportive of trophy hunting for conservation?
Yeah, this is an interesting topic, and I think this really depends on what group of people you're referring to when you say popular consensus, because there are actually a lot of people working in wildlife conservation or sort of living in wildlife areas who recognise that banning trophy hunting without replacing it with other wildlife-related income could actually have some serious negative impacts on conservation. But what Lion Landscapes is really strongly supportive of is evidence-based conservation. And we really believe that African governments and local communities should have the decision-making power when it comes to the conservation management of their wildlife. So anything done to undermine that could be detrimental we would disagree with. So trophy hunting has room for improvement, to be sure, but it does still have a sort of important conservation role, and evidence does suggest that banning it outright would not lead to the best outcomes for wildlife or local people. So, I mean, we could talk about the details of this for hours and discuss many levels of it, but on a kind of higher level, the trophy hunting debate for me has been a sort of quite a scary example of how popular consensus in one group of people can almost completely override other and often more informed groups of people. and the needs and wishes of African people. So I'm deeply concerned that top conservationists and scientists with many years of experience have been ignored in favor of people with very little knowledge or experience, but might have a more palatable viewpoint for larger audiences. So I kind of think how is it that famous actors and politicians from countries like the UK, which has all but lost its wildlife, are sort of telling countries that still hold some of the Earth's greatest biodiversity how to manage that biodiversity? So these are the things that have really sort of shocked and concerned me. I think there'll be a diversity of views on the details of this subject within the organisation as a whole. However, I think everyone in Lion Landscapes will be sort of fully aligned on the absolute need for evidence-based and really respectful discourse on any conservation subject, and also on the need for African governments and communities to be the voices we listen to most in any discourse related to the management of their resources. And so these are the things that haven't really happened, and these are the things that Lion Landscapes have really supported.
So how can individuals contribute to lion landscapes and lion conservation as a whole?
The best way individuals can contribute is always to sort of find an organization or a group you believe in and fund their work. All sort of conservation organizations on the ground are always short of money. So this is, the best way to be able to help. But sometimes people can't do that. Obviously, they might not have the money to be able to do that, to help. So if you can't provide financial support, then probably the next best thing is to do your bit to properly understand the complexity and nuances of the challenges that are being faced on the ground, and then be a strong voice countering the kind of dangerous misinformation that's out there. Because actually misinformation does a lot of damage to conservation efforts. And so sort of really doing proper research and listening to the views of people and communities who are on the forefront of conservation. And even if you feel that you may not agree with them, I think is really important. So always doing proper due diligence is a great place to start.
And my final question for you is that what has been your greatest learning as a conservationist?
All right. Well, my steep learning curve all the way, and it continues to be so. I mean, I continue to learn all the time. But probably the most important thing I've learned is that I need to embrace complexity for solutions, right? So I need to really embrace that complexity and nuance whilst not getting paralyzed by that complexity. And this is actually surprisingly difficult to do. I don't want to act too fast with unforeseen negative consequences, but I also don't want to let perfection be the enemy of progress. So getting that balance right is something I'm always working on. And another important learning point for me was the realization that we cannot really achieve anything worthwhile alone. And I think the importance of leaving our egos behind and investing in true collaboration came with maturity for me, but it's absolutely critical to achieve them at scale.
Thank you so much for that answer. So that is my final question for you. Thank you so much for your time today.
You're very, very welcome. It's been great talking to you, Anish.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Think Wildlife podcast. You can learn more about Lion Landscapes on their website and social media links, which have been provided in the description below. And don't forget to share and subscribe to this podcast.